environmental disasters. So addressing multi-hazards has an effect on a child's well-being. And this requires us to have a coherent and reliable risk information and analysis that incorporates a child-focused lens. So the generation of child-inclusive climate and disaster risk information and analysis involves bringing together all sectors, providing systems and services that are related to child's well-being with climate, environment, and disaster management entities. And so this is what led to the Children's Climate Risk Information Initiative. The aim of this initiative is to enrich, create, and use child-inclusive, multi-hazard, and multi-sector risk information and analysis to support the alignment and coordination of planning and programming efforts to face climate, environmental, and other natural and human hazards. And this is relevant for emergency preparedness and response, disaster risk reduction, resilience programming, and climate change adaptation. The Child Risk Information Initiative also seeks to develop a replicable process for the construction of what we call a subnational risk assessment model. And so this is the Children's Climate Risk Index and Disaster Risk Model. And this is integrated into an interactive geospatial platform, which I will take you through in a little bit. The initiative also seeks to strengthen the use and application of child-inclusive risk data and analysis, which results in advocacy, policy, and risk-informed programming, including through the engagement of communities and youth. And as part of this process, the initiative seeks to strengthen the common understanding of child-inclusive climate and disaster risk amongst stakeholders across a variety of sectors. So all of this is what led to the creation of the Global Initiative, which some of you may have been a part of. A lot of government departments were involved in this initiative, and the idea was to create a tool that would allow for cross-country comparison of risks and paint a global picture of child and vulnerable population risks. The global model was and still is a very important tool, but it doesn't offer the granular level of data needed to best inform decision making. And so this is what led to the subnational CCRI initiative. The objective of the subnational model is to move from cross-country comparison using global data sets to local area comparison within a country using country-specific indicators and country data sets at a subnational level. So you can see the example that we have up here is of Kenya, who is the model that is probably the furthest ahead in this process. They started quite a while ahead of some of the other countries. So if we have a look here, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but the Child Risk Information Initiative is part of a collaboration between UNICEF and USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance. And there are several countries that are undertaking the process, which are all at different stages. So we have been very fortunate to be able to learn from some of the other countries who are a bit further along in the process. So if we look then at what is this CCRI DRM I keep referring to, which we really need a shorter name for it, but in any case, understanding the risk of erosion of development progress and the deepening deprivations of disasters that affect children and vulnerable groups is a complex and multidimensional problem. So the CCRI model, an interactive geospatial platform that goes along with it, offers a framework for analysis of these risks. The theoretical framework of the model specifies the individual risk dimensions, and based on this framework, indicators are then selected to construct what is called a composite risk index. And this helps us to understand and measure the likelihood of multiple natural and human hazards that can lead to the erosion of development progress and deepen deprivations. It also seeks to identify which areas are most at risk of deepening deprivations and humanitarian situations for children due to their exposure to multiple natural and human hazards, and provides data to help understand the underlying factors that contribute to these risks. It provides a visual representation of risks across two pillars, namely hazards, and secondly is child vulnerabilities. And ultimately, the CCRI allows for us to simplify a very complex reality. And so it helps to contribute to the understanding of this complex, multi-dimensional problem that we have discussed. Again, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but for your understanding, the model is built across two pillars, which I already alluded to. So you have exposure to shocks and stresses, or what we refer to as hazards, and then you have child vulnerability. Under each of these pillars, you have a variety of components. So if we think of things like floods, fires, we then have subcomponents that comprise those. So if we talk about floods, you might have riverine floods and coastal flooding. If we talk about fires, you may have structural fires and vegetation fires. And the same goes for child vulnerability. You will have higher level components, and that is then broken down into subcomponents. What we then do is we go through a process of sourcing data. That data is then treated and cleaned, and through a series of mathematical combinations, we're able to then construct our composite index. That is then what allows us to allocate risk levels to each of those components and subcomponents, which go into our two pillars and allow for us to generate maps, which we'll take a look at shortly. It's important to note that CCRI is not a primary data collection tool. It is dependent on secondary data at this point. It's also not an early warning tool. So yes, it is designed to allow for proactive decision making, but it's not going to give you a 24 or a 12-hour warning when something is going to happen. It's going to give you an indication of time periods where things are likely to happen. It's also not a post-disaster needs assessment tool, so it's not going to give you that information of immediately after an event has occurred, what is needed. And it's also not designed for cross-country comparison. So where the global platform did allow for you to compare countries, the idea is that the subnational model allows for you to rather look within your country and compare district to district. So I've spoken a lot about this, but I think most people probably be like, all right, well, what does this look like? So the CCRI is ultimately a visualization of data on a geospatial platform, and it showcases the child-specific hazards and vulnerabilities. And there are two key pillars that allow for risk levels to be viewed, which we've spoken about: child vulnerability and shocks and stresses. And these allow for risk levels to then be seen, color-coded, and support in decision making. So if we have a look at the development process that we went through for South Africa, we've achieved a few key milestones. And I want to just preface this by saying we have not yet finalized the model. By the end of this month, we will actually have a finalized version of the model, which will be available. I will share a link to our story map, which sits in ArcGIS at the moment, which anyone is able to access and have a look at. So today I'm just going to take you through the key milestones and then talk about the use of this model and where we see it going. So in terms of key milestones, this has been a highly consultative process. So we've had national stakeholder engagements, provincial stakeholder engagements, and youth engagements, where we did a series of workshops and understood what are the components, subcomponents, and indicators that we should be including in the model. Following that, we then sourced the data that is needed and set up government relationships for national ownership. So COGTA's National Strategic Hub, as well as DFFE's team, are going to be taking this over from UNICEF in the coming month. And what has been really amazing is, of all the countries that have undergone this process, South Africa has been the only one to successfully achieve national ownership, which means this will become a resource that can be used by government in an official capacity. We will also be finalizing the development of the data tables that were based off of our draft model structure. We're busy reviewing those data sets and building out the geospatial layers. And then we will be overlaying those layers to then establish the CCRI model which we have already validated once, but that will then be available for ongoing validation. So all of the data we sourced came into these data tables. This is what we are in the process of finalizing, and that then allows for the maps to be created. So when I spoke about the two pillars, we can see their exposure to hazards, shocks and stresses, and child vulnerability. Those are then overlaid in a geospatial platform, and that is what gives us our overall risk ratings. So if we take a look here very quickly, you can see there are a variety of maps that have been generated. This is just a quick snapshot. There are a lot more maps, but through the process, we've then gone and looked at where the various risk levels lie for hazards, as well as looking at the vulnerability maps. And then together, these have been put into that final CCRI map. So what will then be able to be done is you will be able to zoom in at a district level and look at a risk level for children and associated vulnerable groups in a particular district. We opted to go with the district level because at a provincial level, it doesn't give you the same granular data that's needed. We would have loved to have gone down all the way to municipal level, but because data is not consistent at that level across all of the provinces, at this point, we nominated the district level because we were able to get far more information. So the model, like I said, it is going to be available in an open source platform. At the moment, it's built in ArcGIS, but once we have added in all of the validation information, it's going to go into a platform called GeoSite, and this will be embedded on Cogta's strategic hub as well as DFFE's climate change platform. What we found to be so amazing about this platform is that it is completely open source. So while the data sets are protected and no one can access those, the outward facing information is accessible by anyone. And so this means that it is going to be able to be used by anyone and everyone in their decision making. And so if we look at supporting vulnerable groups based on what we've spoken about already, I think it's important for us to look at how this model can be actively used to improve the outcomes for children across South Africa. So first and foremost, the model helps to identify which districts face the highest risks, combining data on both climate change and disaster threats, as well as those specific vulnerabilities of children in particular areas. And so this means that decision makers can immediately see where is the greatest need. Secondly, the model highlights how different types of shocks, like floods or heat waves, intersect with child vulnerability indicators, such as access to education, nutrition, or healthcare. And this intersectional view is critical for truly understanding how risks compound and impact children in a diverse way. And from there, the model becomes a powerful tool for prioritizing adaptation and disaster risk reduction interventions, and helps ensure that investments are focused not only on most at-risk areas, but also on the most at-risk populations, children being one of those. Also supports early targeting of services and infrastructure, so helping social development teams or municipalities to decide where to reinforce clinics or expand water and sanitation facilities. And importantly, the CCRI helps to promote evidence-based planning across sectors. So health, education, social development departments, as well as NGOs and local government actors can use the tool to develop more inclusive and equitable strategies. And through its integrated and layered approach, it allows for a holistic view of risk. So not just focusing on individual silos, but bringing these together, which can support coordinated response and resilience building. And finally, and I think probably the most important, is that it takes what can often be a complex or inaccessible data structure and translates it into actionable insights. So it makes it far easier for those working on the ground to make informed, child-focused decisions that drive sustainable development and climate resilience. And so if we think about that here, we already had a look at the maps. Those individual bits of information have all gone into creating these individual maps. And so again, you are able to zoom in and out of this map Whether you're working in KZN or you're working in the Northern Cape, you can zoom into your particular region and have a look at the intersect between the hazards and the vulnerable population groups, with the understanding, of course, that children as a group that is a vulnerable population group, but it's also their families and their communities that need to be considered. And so it does give us quite a lot of layers of information in there. All right, so why does this matter? So the CCRI centers child rights and welfare in climate and disaster risk planning, which is so critical for the future of our country, and especially in a province like KZN, where hazard events are becoming more frequent. It enables child-sensitive risk mapping to inform protective services and school safety planning. It provides data to back up calls for increased funding and support to protect children in high-risk areas, and it encourages cross-sector partnerships focused on child well-being in the face of climate change. And so why should decision makers be using the CCRI? I think I've alluded to a lot of this, but firstly, it aligns with national development and resilience strategies, so things like the NDCs, IDPs, and SDGs. It supports transparent and data-driven resource allocation and program targeting. It provides a replicable, locally owned tool for planning, advocacy, and budgeting. It empowers government to take preemptive action rather than reactive measures and waiting for something to happen. And it builds institutional capacity to manage and adapt to increasing climate threats. What I do want to highlight is some of the key challenges, and I think why it's going to be so important that we do get support in this model going forward. So first and foremost was international funding disruptions. I think most people are aware of the challenges in the international funding space, and so this did set us back slightly because some of our technical team were not able to continue on. We managed to make arrangements, and I think South Africans are very good at making a plan when we need to, but that was certainly a challenge there and just drew attention to why local ownership is so important. Secondly, was access to data. So because of the nature of the data space, we ran into challenges around the cost of data, data ownership, and also current development gaps in data within South Africa. And so these are all areas that it's going to be so important for other government departments to step in and support on in order for this model to continue evolving into something that is going to be robust and support in decision making. So how can you support the model? So first and foremost is supporting adoption of the model. And to maximize the value of it, we really encourage that all participants and decision makers help with adopting this model in your climate adaptation, disaster risk management, and development planning efforts. The model provides a really powerful evidence-based foundation for aligning policies, budgets, and interventions with the realities of what children face across the country. Secondly, as we move forward, we really want your participation and feedback in the model. So this is going to be a resource that will be distributed widely, and your input, whether it's technical or it's contextual or operational, it will all directly shape the next iteration of the tool to ensure that it remains practical and relevant to your needs as government officials and practitioners on the ground. And lastly is advocating for more open and more collaborative data environment. So increased data sharing across sectors and institutions that will strengthen the model, improve its accuracy, and enable more comprehensive and inclusive planning. And this is, I think, going to be really important as there's government ownership of the model and making sure that we're looking at how to share that data. So what is next for the model? We will be looking at doing a feasibility study to include artificial intelligence and machine learning. I'm not going to go through this entire slide just due to time, but what we are going to be looking at is how we can incorporate AI and machine learning to enhance this model. So can we use it to do predictive modeling? Can we use it to fill data gaps? And so we're in the midst of that feasibility study. We may be reaching out to some of you to get your inputs on it. But what we're hoping is that this will generate recommendations and risk frameworks and a prototype concept that will help to guide the future of this model and how AI and machine learning can contribute to the strength of the model. So I've spoken a lot, but all of this to say the CCRI is really a critical tool for understanding how climate change uniquely impacts children, particularly in vulnerable regions like South Africa. So climate change it's not just an environmental issue, it is really a profound threat to the safety and well-being and future of our children. And so for practitioners working in South Africa, what the CCRI does is it offers insights by 1, identifying vulnerabilities, 2, guiding policy and response, and 3, supporting inclusive planning. And for me, I always ask myself, why should people care? And I think what it comes down to is that the CCRI is not just about responding to climate risks. It's about safeguarding the future of our most vulnerable members of society, our children. And so we know that every child has the right to a safe, healthy environment, and the CCRI helps to uphold that right by guiding both immediate action and long-term resilience strategies. And so it bridges that gap between scientific data and humanitarian action. And so, in short, the CCRI is more than just an index of numbers and maps. It is really a lifeline for millions of children in South Africa, and it enables governments and NGOs and communities to proactively address the growing threats of climate change in a way that is focused, impactful, and most importantly, is equitable for children. And so by investing time in the CCRI and its outcomes, what we are doing is investing in the future of South Africa's children and making sure that they are not left behind as we see these dramatic climate shifts that are happening more and more. So thank you so much for your time today. I will share links with the Premier's office, which can be distributed. And yeah, I look forward to additional feedback on the model once it is distributed. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Van Schalkwyk, for an important presentation, especially speaking to the future of our province and our country. I'm of the view that we have come to at the end. We're supposed to take lunch or discussion first. Yeah, there may be some discussions. I will allow discussions. After the discussions, I will request that we go straight to the draft action plan for climate change, and then we do the closing remarks. After that, then we will have a lunch and go. Can I therefore receive indications of inputs from the left? Only one hand. Mr. Nkontwane from the right. No hand. Oh, only one hand. Professor Machos. Starting with Mr. Nkontwane, less than a minute.
No, thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Premier.
Mr. Nkontwane, ube ngakho izolusene energy eningi. Uthi sineskade safika. Banga buyasidedela.
No, thank you, Honorable Premier, and thank you to the presenters. I think mine is just a few things, and the first one goes to Dr. Mngoma. I know you talk about IKS, but most of the issues that relate to climate change are nationally determined, and the policy, as it were, is mostly influenced by those who are involved in the national discourse. Now, how do you see us being able to integrate IKS in a space where there is no commonly agreed IKS system? Because we can't say there is an IKS which is indigenous, but we are not sure, all of us, what we're talking about. What is it that we must include? Probably maybe we can advise us as to how we deal with that issue, because when we debate the issue of climate change, we should have a common understanding as society, but also how to influence national government when they work on such policy. On the second one, I think, Honorable Premier, mine is just to sponsor and agree with Ms. Dr. Mbata about the climate data analytics, especially when we deal with the districts. I don't see investors coming to districts without having a clear understanding as to whether that district is disaster prone or not. We need to make sure that they've got an assurance so that we can invite responsible investors. The last one, I can't agree more, and I think I would appreciate if DSD can adopt this part, because they're talking about the future we want, being the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Solwazi Makwanyan. Professor Machozi, over to you.
No, thank you very much. So sorry, Premier. Mine is directed at Ms. Sharma and, well, I understand Professor Sutherland is not here. Your presentations were very aligned and to some extent very complementary. We are also from the same institution, UKZN, but I found you to be talking in parallel. In other words, I didn't hear anything from your presentation that referred largely to what you are doing. You did allude to what she spoke about yesterday, but is there any collaboration between the two of you? And I'm asking this question because someone somewhere said, it was yesterday, that collaboration, that's the question. I'm asking if there is any collaboration between the two of you at an institutional level to enhance the work that we are doing, to give it some meaning, basically. Because what we struggle with in most institutions is us doing the same thing along barriers that are artificial. It is in that context that I'm asking this question. Thanks.
Responses?
Any response? Premier, thank you. It's William Mungoma again. I am a person who likes policies, who likes interrogating policies, because that's one of my specialty. In government, national has to work together with provinces in order to bring something that is respected by both the provinces and national. However, there will be peculiarities because our unique situations. Remember, national does not have a province. It simply coordinates everything that happens on the provinces. But provinces are the ones who have got to say, this is our these are our experiences, and this is the body of knowledge that we have about KwaZulu-Natal. Therefore, when you go to either MinTech or you go to other structures where these issues are discussed, there has to be accommodation for provinces, experiences, expertise, because national cannot dictate what happens in the indigenous knowledge system for the entire country. They should actually assemble or put together a document that accommodates each and every province, because as South Africa, as this country, we have 9 provinces with 9 different experiences which have got to be harnessed in order to produce something that is reflective of South Africa. I wonder if that answers your question.
Thank you, Dr. Mngoma. Siyathokoza Baba. I saw Ms. Sharma.
Thank you, Honorable Premier, and thank you, Prof. Majosi. So, as you will know that Prof. Sutherland, I think, is in the School of Social Science, and I'm in the School of Environmental Science. So that sometimes has made it a bit difficult because you know UKZN is undergoing a restructuring at the moment. So we belong to two different schools and two different departments. But my community-based disaster management plan is based on my research from my thesis. And it was specifically for industrial disasters for those communities. That being said, they also used that same disaster management plan when the floods occurred and were proven to be successful. So definitely, I think it would make sense that we have to collaborate, because certainly Professor Sutherland is ahead of me insofar as early warning systems. That phase was not put in my community-based disaster management plan. So I'm hoping to submit at the end of the month. And as soon as I submit, I think we have to collaborate. Her research will probably form the first phase, risk identification, early warning systems, and then this is more what I presented, evacuation routes and preparedness measures, is your second and third phases. And we'll have to look into recovery phases together, but thank you for the recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Ndlovu. Draft action plan for climate change.
Honorable Premier, MECs,
I see that you have 15 minutes.
all protocol observed. I will try and be quick. I think I'll just start, Honorable Premier, by indicating that we have a link with all the presentation. I'll request everyone to refresh, because what happened was people submitted new presentations even today. So if you haven't refreshed, we were loading. So kindly refresh so that you can get all the presentations. The second part is that, Honorable Premier, in relation to this presentation, we've also had a link with inputs where we are requesting that please sponsor inputs, and you would have had a chance of looking at this document that I'm presenting and see if we've missed anything in trying to capture everything that we've been doing. We already have 6 responses, we acknowledge that, and we are hoping we'll get more. Basically, this is a draft, and it would have to go through the council and also the executive council in terms of getting it to be an approved document. But it does have guiding principles that we think we were trying to collate, where we are looking at alignment, we are looking at catalyzing the provincial climate actions, relevance in terms of our socio-economic context in this province, the cross-sectoral collaborations that is coming out, I think even in the last one, and the public-private sector partnerships that we need to get on. Also, we indicate that we would have to focus on areas that, as our action plan would have to say, we are accessing the recent and the relevant climate science. And I think we are going to be fostering, everybody who was presenting here, we said they are going to be part of us, and this partnership is going to be ongoing. The whole data that is available out there will be collaborated on, and I think in the Office of the Premier, where we are responsible for coordinating data, will then take responsibility of making sure we lead on that. Issue of mainstreaming of sector plans and infrastructure master plan, we mainstream climate change, and I think across all our sectoral plans, those are focus areas. Community-led, it has come out quite strongly, locally-led climate-relevant activities, and therefore it means all our programs would have to be tailor-made in each district and each area. Township and rural development is the core. We are not just going to be urban looking, we'll be making sure that this action plan is across from a resilience intersection. Communication is going to be the theme across in terms of dissemination of information. Honorable Premier, just this was being streamed live just to make sure that we communicate, and I think it's trying to do that. We have 3 slides that are high level, and I'm going to end there. Then the rest of the others are annexure, and the annexure will then be able to be finalized with all the inputs. But at the high level, we are saying, 1, we need to drive a provincial behavior, communication, and information campaign. and that would be the council. And that is the role of this council in terms of why it was formed, which means targeting all citizens in the province, driven by the council members who are part of this council. We have a multi-sectoral membership, and I think you would have seen national in terms of the commission, they raised it on saying, is there multi-sectoral? It is multi-sectoral, which means Amakosis, Nduna, religious leaders, councillors, civil society, government, our MECs, our honorable premier, youth, teachers, women, business, everybody is going to be driving that, but also where this will be driven at a local level, and I think this is what was coming out in the thing at the ward level, in our communities, in schools, in our churches, everywhere we will be, it's about this communication. But what also came out was, what are the key messages that was the talk? So we are saying we must have a climate change, a non-scientific language being developed. And this is one part that when we walk out of here, Premier will try and do in our indigenous language, which we can then disseminate, run on social media, run on the media, and say, this is what we are communicating. What are the messages that we'll be communicating in that language? A clean province. This province is just going to say we are clean. Our neighborhood, our homes, our streets, our rivers, our environment, which is, I think that is what was coming out as a priority, but also the message, saving. What are we saving? Our water. The use, therefore, of our grey water, and I think there was a point that says we need to change the mindset of people. It's going to be driven then through that communication. Saving energy everywhere, and I think starting with government, everywhere, our buildings, our homes, everyone. So it's a mindset, but it can only be through information, education. Our natural resources, to protect them. Our wetlands, our grassland, our water, our land, that is where we clean the river, but we also protect. The spring water, we clean and we protect. Drive recycling everywhere. That is starting at home, and I think part of your circular economy, from food waste, where does it go, how does it produce? So that's all going to fall under communication. And then the issue of research, collate and disseminate province-wide indigenous knowledge responses. I think whilst there might be issues of policy, but in terms of what we know we need to do, as what our communities know at a local level, how do we protect during the fire, what do we do? Those things are known. How do we save water? We know that, so driving that as well in terms of using the indigenous knowledge. So saving water, the use of renewable energy, managing land, the building and the design thereof in terms of indigenous knowledge are areas that we believe. But the last one that came out was the alternative building material that is coming out as an issue, and saying how do we drive and collect the information and drive that communication. So that was on at a provincial level, but also within that context of communication. Remember, your different districts have different nuances. North, Umkhanyakude is different from eThekwini, so then each district will then tailor-make its own. Remember, it's community-led at a local level, so that response, whilst you have it driven by the council, but the mayors do sit here, they will be driving then their own communication for the local response. At a governance level, the issue of updating our climate change strategy so that it pays special focus on areas. So we would have to look at that strategy with focus on vulnerable groups. We're now getting data on what we need to do, climate health that is coming out, food security nexus that we spoke about, but also the issues of infrastructure, which is coming out later. I think the other area that we elevated was government and business. If anything, developing infrastructure that is climate smart, whether it's government infrastructure or business, and we have to go and mobilize. And that will start from our feasibility studies to design to construction. But going forward, this province will drive that and ensure that we are going to be climate smart. Then engage business sector to develop plans, policies, and even go to bylaws that includes systems that are ensuring that we are saving water. So the save communication would also then translate into the business to say, how are they saving water within. And this is where ATR, we did put in the responsible people where we'll be engaging then with the business and saying, and getting those plans from the municipalities themselves, talking to the businesses. Well, remember, we are clear that which sectors are most losing water or energy, and we'll be then targeting those. Our government, from a planning side, this is us, probably from OTP, COGTA in particular, Treasury, how our sector plans and special plans integrate and mainstream climate change would be another one that will be implementing local community-based disaster management plan. I think that the municipalities had already developed these business plans, but we'll be looking at saying how are they community-based, looking at what has come out, strengthening our partnership with our research institutions. This would continue, understanding the potential of the province in terms of carbon capture. I think this is an opportunity that we would be looking at, and then the governance with strengthening the data-driven and monitoring, but also the issue of institutional arrangement, secretariat linking with national. 9, it's projects with the circular economy, with specific projects that will see that they are being driven, but also developing more in terms of saying from a circular, leveraging on climate finance. I think this one came out, prioritization first of what we need to do as a province, but also then attracting that investment with the coordinating structure in one point. It was clearly with project preparation and climate PPP platform that would allow everybody to draw, and that would be opportunities in the long term. We also need to look at the future from a long-term perspective. Hydrogen energy is our future, and we need to be able to say from feasibility what is possible, possibly also look at the long-term, the desalination linking with renewable energy. The issue of climate smart human settlements has come out with even, we call it high end, but we are saying the eco-estates. Let's start now to say, how do we make those eco-estates be economic, climate smart? Climate smart agriculture, I think there's a lot of inputs and people who can support, but also balancing. I think the issue that come out, and I think that is what will come out in the action plan, how do we balance business opportunities for forestry? So delving into those areas where it's commercial, we need it, but we also then need to balance with the need of the ecosystem. Honorable Premier, I'm not going to go through, when you start going through the rest of the department, the document, you can see that we've now tried to unpack each area, but we are still looking for inputs and we are hoping we can finalize it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Can you applaud Dr. Ndlovu? Well, I see that you are presenting under time pressure. And I'm of the view that when you finalize the document, you must make it simpler and not too long, and points to actions and other elements such as the timeframes and who has to take a responsibility and who has to be involved. Well, thank you very much. Ngiyafisa ke ukuba ngikhuleke emakhosini aseNdlunkulu kundaba ezitha sesivala. The Honorable MEC Shinga for Social Development and Honorable MEC Mayor for Public Works and Infrastructure, Your Worship, the mayors, the acting DG, Provincial Champlain, Chief of Staff, DDGs, the academias, members of the council present, and the technocrats present. Today, I'm presenting my closing remarks. Over the past 2 days, we've engaged in a deeply constructive exchange of ideas, evidence, and practical strategies. This has not been merely a workshop, but an important milestone in strengthening our collective capacity to respond to the profound and urgent challenges of climate change. I wish to extend my sincere appreciation to all participants for their intellectual rigor, frank discussions, and commitment for forging workable solutions. From my office, I especially acknowledge the leadership of the acting DG, Deputy Director Generals, Special Advisors, whose strategic guidance has been instrumental from the establishment of the Climate Change Council to the meticulous planning and execution of this workshop. I also wish to recognize the dedication of officials from our offices and from across the departments who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure the smooth running of this event. Your administrative and logistical support has been the backbone of our success here. To the members of the newly established Climate Change Council, I extend my gratitude for your insight, patience, and strategic guidance. It is important to note that this workshop was postponed twice, not out of hesitation, but out of deliberate commitment to ensuring that the process delivered real value. We wanted to convene only when we were certain that the quality of the research, the depth of the analysis, and the relevance of the presentations met the highest standards, of which we achieved that. I believe we can agree that the outcomes we have achieved fully justify that decision. What we have witnessed over these 2 days is more than the exchange of information. It is the alignment of vision, evidence, and political will. These positions us to move from discussion to decisive action, guided by science, informed by lived realities, and driven by our shared responsibility to safeguard both our environment and our economic future. To our wonderful presenters, your contributions have enriched our understanding, sharpened our policy focus, and reinforced the reality that climate action is not a peripheral agenda, but central to sustainable economic growth, social resilience, and intergenerational justice. Ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, let me speak to the clear picture that has emerged from this workshop. It is now crystal clear that climate change is far beyond the realm of environmental theory or academic discourse. It is an issue that cuts to the every core of our existence, our health, our livelihoods, and our shared future. It is also a defining force in shaping our political economy. The evidence presented here has demonstrated beyond doubt that climate change intersects with every sector, from agriculture and water security to energy, infrastructure, and human settlement patterns. It influences food prices, migration trends, trade competitiveness, and even the stability of our communities. In other words, it is not a distant or isolated challenge. It is an ever-present factor that will increasingly define the pace and direction of our development. Understanding this reality demands that we, as leaders and institutions, adopt a systems-wide approach. Climate action must be integrated into economic planning, fiscal policy, industrial strategy, and social protection frameworks. This is not a matter of choice. It is a matter of strategic necessity if we are to protect both our natural environment and our economic sovereignty. This is the time to embed social and environmental justice in climate change that is rooted in community-based intervention and improve people's quality. We were challenged to look for innovative solutions to sustain and enhance basic infrastructure developments because of the immense capacity of members of the community to work with local municipalities, private sector, and civil society, among others. It is also clear that we should embark on partnerships between the government, civil society, non-governmental organizations, private sector, traditional institutions, among others. Partnerships are required to address climate change problems. It emerged also that we need to have a focus that is people-centered. In city planning, that means that the objective and impact should be to improve the lives of people. We need to safeguard our ecological infrastructure in Durban and KwaZulu-Natal broadly, because that is what makes us different and to stand out. The workshop reminded us to have robust and community-enhancing and empowering early warning systems to mitigate the risk of flood disaster. This will also assist us in learning and scaling up the lessons of each experience and apply them effectively to respond to climate occurrences. The workshop also amplified the need to take advantage of climate change from an economic perspective in the areas of desalination, green hydrogen, and brown hydrogen, forestation, waste beneficiation, carbon capture, utilization, biofuels, and storage, amongst others. I have full confidence that Secretariat will consolidate, capture, and refine all presentations and resolutions that have emerged from this workshop. As chair of this process, I look forward to taking these resolutions and recommendations forward to our Executive Council, and thereafter engaging our legislature as well as organized local government through SALCA. This is critical because the fight against climate change requires not only provincial leadership, but a coherent, multi-sphere response that is both coordinated and measurable. Colleagues, what we have achieved here is more than dialogue. We have laid the foundation for a provincial roadmap that is anchored in evidence, enriched by diverse expertise, and aligned with the realities facing our communities. It will now fall on us, as political leaders, administrators, and social partners, to translate these deliberations into policies, budgets, and concrete actions that make a tangible difference in people's life. With those words, allow me to once again thank each one of you for your commitments, your time, and your service. By being here, you have not only contributed to the success of this workshop, but to the larger mission of safeguarding the future of our province and our people. Time of action is now. Only one question remains now: what next? Or rather, another question can be, how are we going to enhance awareness in our society, as it was reflected that less than 50% people are aware of the challenge of climate change? How are we going to ensure that every sector of our society or stakeholders is involved? How are we going to measure progress in what we are doing? We need a clear program of action, of mobilizing our women and youth to champion socio-economic opportunities presented by climate change. Each government needs to have, government department needs to have a clear program of action to mobilize our society to participate in climate adaptation and climate economy. It was really an honor, I must say, and a privilege to chair a session of professors, doctors, intellectuals, experts, amakhosi, and our leaders, and high-level deliberations. As you live to your different destinies, I pray for the safe journey. You must all know that you are a wonderful asset for our nation and for the future of our country and our children. What we do today is an important journey to the future. I thank you. May I request the provincial chaplain, Pastor Magwaza, to pray as we close and also bless food. The arrangement that have been given today for lunch is that Umkanyagu Depi will be used for MECs, mayors, amakhosi, our academias, and then we also know our elders who are also present here. They will have to also use the Umkanyagu Tepi, and then the rest of us, we will use the dining hall across.
Thank you so much, Honorable Premier Mpemba. Can we all pray? Nkulunkulu wethu onesihawu sonke, our gracious Father, we want to thank you for this wonderful summit. We thank you for strength. We thank you for wisdom that was shared. Father, we thank you for all these deliberations. And we thank you, oh God, as we are about to depart, that there would be no one in any accident. They shall be safe and protected by your grace. Father, thank you for the food we are about to eat, that it shall nourish us and give us the vitamins we need in our bodies. In the name of Jesus, we have prayed and we thank you. Amen and amen.
Amen.